Good evening and welcome to the Veterans Forum. Today is Friday the 13th, July 2007. This program is part of a public service that's being carried on by the studio in conjunction with the Library of Congress, wherein we have the ability and the good fortune of being able to share some of the histories of some of the people who fought in World War I, Korea, Vietnam, and you name it. These, I think, will be of most interest to you. Tonight, we have another great candidate, John Whisler. His story, we think, is one that a lot of people will look at and wonder, and hopefully it'll spark some of you that this is what we'd like you to try and do. John, good evening, and we welcome you. For the record, would you tell us your name? Spell your last name, please, for clearly.
My full name is John Arthur Whisler, W-H-I-S-L-E-R. I was born September 16th, 1925 in Granite City, Illinois. And for those that don't know, that's across the river from St. Louis, home of the Cardinals.
Ah, for the birds, huh?
For the birds.
Tell us, if you will, what was your branch of service and your active duty dates?
I was in the United States Army, the Army Air Corps for the most part, from August 10th, 1943 to November 24th, 1945. Then when I was discharged right after Thanksgiving in 1945, I enlisted in the reserve as a staff sergeant for 3 years. After 3 years of staff sergeanting, I decided I'd have enough of that, so I decided not to re-enlist. But in the meantime, I had entered engineering school at Washington University in St. Louis. And the Air Force asked me if I would accept a commission. And I said, as long as I don't have to do anything, yes. So I went to Scott Field, and after 3 days of physical, mental, and psychological testing, they said, congratulations, you're a second lieutenant.
Well.
So I was a second lieutenant in the reserve for 5 years. Then I got married during that period, and I didn't work for promotions. I just was in the inactive reserve. And I had visions of becoming the oldest living second lieutenant. And the Army Air Corps had switched to the Air Force by then, and they offered me a lifetime commission, and I said no. So after a total of 11 years in active duty and reserve, I got out.
So you're PFC, Proud Free Civilian.
Private Free Civilian is right, and glad of it. Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
Thank you.
Can we go back a little bit, though? When you were a youngster, what was it like growing up back in those days?
Well, as you and I had discussed previously, we're both children of the Depression. My father was a banker, and the summer that my mother was pregnant with me, he and my grandfather built a two-family home, which, after Roosevelt became president and closed the banks, he wound up losing. And he lost a lot more than just his home. He lost his confidence. He moved to the farm in southern Illinois that he had grown up with my grandfather, and for the rest of his life, he was a farmer. So I lived in the city, in effect, until I was about 11 years old, and from then on, I grew up on a farm in southern Illinois. I am just old enough to remember working with horses and mules. Life was tough, but we didn't mind because me and all of my cousins, none of us had any money. So having no money was no great hardship. We wore pass-me-down clothes, and it was a great life in its own way.
Now, prior to getting into the service, were you in school or working or something like that?
Yes. When I was a senior in high school, I enlisted in the Navy Air Corps and promptly flunked the physical because I didn't have 20/20 vision. I had 20/30. So then I enlisted in the Army in the Army Specialized Training Program. That was a program calculated to lead you to a mechanical engineering degree in about 3.5 years or thereabouts. And as I would like to mention in a minute, like many things, I got booted out of that program for no fault of my own, simply because the Army decided they needed more infantrymen than they needed mechanical engineers. So I left home on August the 10th while I was 17 years old, went to the University of Wisconsin, 1 semester, and then reported to the Army for Infantry Basic at Fort Benning, Georgia. I got separated from my group, and it's a long story, and I won't go into the details, but I wound up in the Air Force. The luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Because of my 2 roommates at Wisconsin, one was killed and the other one badly shot up in the Battle of the Bulge. So I'm glad I wasn't with them.
Amen.
Yep. It would have been very tough. So I started out in the ASTP program, was eliminated from that because they decided they had too many people in it, and I managed to get into aviation cadets. And I was issued a pretty cadet uniform and classified as a fighter pilot trainee. And guess what? Got booted out of that. The government decided they had 40,000 too many cadets. So that was 39,999 and me. So I was sent to Lake Charles, Louisiana as a buck private working in the armament section. Rank was frozen. You could not get a promotion in the United States except by going to a technical school or being in combat. So I volunteered for gunnery school as a way of getting out of that dead end that I was in there in Louisiana. Went to Tyndall Field Gunnery School in Florida, was assigned to B-24s at Westover Field here in Massachusetts. Took my overseas training at Westover and went overseas from Westover. Yeah, that would have been in late 1944.
Now, were you a waist gunner, tail gunner, nose gunner?
I was a ground armorer by virtue of my experience there in Louisiana working in the armament section.
Okay.
And then I was a nose gunner. So I was dual rated. Each crew had an armorer and a nose gunner, and I was both. Like we had radioman gunner, engineers gunner, armor gunners, and 3 gunner gunners.
Your primary MOS, though, you were a gunner.
Primary MOS is gunner, yes. As I say, we took our training at Westover. We picked up a brand new B-24 at Mitchell Field in New York City, flew it to Manchester, New Hampshire, from where we departed the North Atlantic route right after Thanksgiving of 1944. It was cold. We were the last group to go overseas. And at Goose Bay, Labrador, our pilot taxied into a snowbank. And you can imagine what that does to an engine when it's turning over at several thousand RPM and suddenly hits a snowbank that's about 8 feet high. It ruins the engine. So we had to get a new engine flown up from New York City, the plane repaired, and that put us about 2 weeks behind schedule, and the weather got colder. But we did make it to Italy in only 63 days.
Wow. By
By way of Goose Bay, Greenland, Iceland, Valley Wales, then down on Christmas evening 1944 to Marrakech, North Africa, over to Tunis and up to Italy.
So you saw a lot of the countryside.
So we did. We saw a lot of the countryside, and like I said, it only took us 63 days to get from New York to Italy. But that was a fluke. Normally you would make that trip in about 6 days, something like that. As a matter of fact, we came home in 6.
Oh. Everybody came home a lot faster than they
Came
went
home.
over.
We were not really in any big hurry to get over there, believe me.
No. I'm digressing, but when we were invited to go to Hawaii, it took us almost 10 days. And I don't think that the guy who was steering the boat knew which way was straight.
Yeah.
Zigzag all over hex half acre. Now, when you landed there in Italy, were you in immediate combat, or did you have to get some additional training? Or
We had a most unusual experience. Each pilot would fly 3 missions in those days as a co-pilot with a veteran crew. And each crewman would fly at least 1 with a veteran crew. Our pilot was shot down on his first mission. So we were 8 men without a pilot. So the month of February 1945, that would have been, we didn't fly at all. We had no pilot.
Oh.
So ultimately, they checked out the man whose seat he had taken as our first pilot. And that co-pilot became our pilot. He had 11 missions at the time. So we didn't actually fly our first combat mission until March 4th, after leaving late November.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was kind of a fluky experience. In a way, it was kind of good because I'm sure that had that not happened that way, I would have probably gotten in the full 35 missions required for a tour of duty. As it was, I had 21 when the war ended.
Yeah, but you had them all, then you back. That's the good
Oh
part.
yeah, oh yeah. At the time, we didn't know what had happened to our pilot. And after the war, one Sunday, I was eating Sunday dinner and there was a knock at our front door on the farm there in southern Illinois. And here was ex-Lieutenant McFadden looking me up. He had been taken prisoner. He said he bailed out, landed in a tree with about a half a dozen German soldiers pointing their submachine guns up at him. And he spent the rest of the war in a prison camp. And he had married a girl from over here at Chicopee. And the last time I saw him was 1948. He was leaving to go to Europe to fly in the Berlin airlift. He flew a C-54 into Berlin.
Yeah.
And we still correspond at least every Christmas, once a year.
Good. Now, getting back to your, if you will, your introduction to combat, what's your memory of your first flight? Were you scared, happy, excited, or numb?
Probably numb's the best category. The night before our first mission, which was Wiener Neustadt, Austria, we all went to the Enlisted Men's Club, had a couple of drinks, went home and wrote silly "if I don't come back" letters.
Oh, yeah.
And we left those letters on the ground. Subsequently, after that first mission, we tore up the letters and forgot that nonsense. But that first mission was a milk run. We had no enemy opposition.
No flak or anything?
No flak, no nothing. And we didn't get many like that. But I thought, oh, hey, there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
I found out that was not the case later. But getting to the actual combat itself, my first two missions were easy. The third one was to an oil refinery in Vienna called Floresdorf. And when you went over Floresdorf, you had 490 guns shooting at you. And we lost 2 engines on that mission. 2 engines shot out. And that's what the German Air Force waited, was a stricken bomber, and they'd jump on it.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, we called for escort, and that was quite an experience. We had 6 P-51s doing figure 8s around us as we flew on 2 engines back from Austria to Italy. And you've, heard of, I'm sure, the Talladega Airmen, the all-Negro fighter squadron. Well, those P-51s with their tails painted solid white were the Cottontails, the all-Negro fighter squadron.
Beautiful.
And they were excellent. They never lost a bomber to an enemy fighter.
I know.
And I watched the leader. It was quite an experience. He was maintaining radio silence, and he wiggled his wings, and his wingman wiggled back. And I thought, what are these guys doing? And I looked down below, and there was a German plane. The 2 of them peeled off and dove on top of that guy out of the sun.
Just greased him?
There was an orange burst of flame, and he never, I'm sure, knew what hit him. And the 2 of them pulled back up, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. They did a victory roll together.
Oh.
While maintaining formation, they did a roll like that, and then returned to their escort duty.
Now, when you're coming back, though, limping like that, were you at altitude or just about hugging the deck?
We would lose altitude.
Yeah.
We were hit bad at about 24,000 feet, and that 700 and some odd miles back to Italy, we were losing altitude all the way.
Okay, yeah. A long, low guide.
A long, low guide with 2 engines working fine. The pilot came on the radio and said, if we lose another one, what'll it be, Russia or Switzerland? Of course, we all yelled Switzerland, because in those days, the Swiss would put you up in a hotel, and they actually even had German and American airmen in the same hotels.
Oh, they were neutral.
Oh, yeah. They would confiscate the airplane.
Oh, yeah.
Be it German or American, but they had airmen of opposite sides in the same hotels.
Now, were they what's the word? Differentiated, if you will, officers versus enlisted, or was it just a big hodgepodge of everybody?
Now that I don't know. In prison camp, yes.
Yeah, in Stalag.
In Stalags, yes. I really have no idea about in Switzerland.
Now, I'm going back because it's an amazing thing to me. Yeah, the old story about the guys in the submarine would look up and see a guy in an airplane. What idiot would want to jump out of a damn good plane versus you guys up there? Who wants to go to heck in a tin can? You know, there was never a balance. But now, getting back to training, what were you doing when you took your first parachute training? How does that affect you?
We didn't take any parachute training to speak of.
Just strap it on and hope that nothing to use it, huh?
Yeah, being in the nose, the way we would bail out of a B-24 is you would pull some latch pins on the nose wheel door. It would drop off. Yeah. You would bend down on your knees and do a somersault under the nose wheel. Just literally roll forward.
That's kind of risky, though, isn't it?
Well, it's the only way to get out of the nose.
Yeah.
If the plane's going down.
Okay.
Well, if you had time, you could crawl through the tunnel to the bomb bay and bail out of the bomb bay, which was a lot safer. But yeah, there was one navigator in our group was hit bad at the target, had to bail out under the nose wheel, and he popped his chute in the nose. Oh, no. Well, he gathered it together in his arms like this and rolled out under the nose wheel, opened his arms, and the chute opened, and he landed safely, and was a psychological case from then on.
Do you blame him?
No, he was scared so bad he never flew again. No. And he sought psychiatric care. But anyway, no, we had no training really in how to bail out at all.
Now, you said you flew, what, 21 missions?
Yeah.
Were there any real outstanding ones other than the third one that you could talk about, or you'd like to talk about?
Well, I guess one of the most outstanding to me was we bombed in April of 1945 the Munich Reims Airdrome. And we took a burst flak shell right under the nose of the plane, and it just literally stood that B-24 on its tail.
Yep.
And the shell burst under the nose, and a piece of flak opened a hole that you could have thrown a basketball through, right between the navigator's nose and my back. Whoa. And I had heard that you could lose a leg or something and not even feel it. So I stomped the left foot, yeah, it's okay. I stomped the right foot, yeah, it's okay. And I turned around, and Lieutenant Blass, our navigator, was white. If that shell had been 6 inches further back, it would have taken his head off. Ooh. And I said, Blass, are you okay? He couldn't talk. He couldn't say a word. And the piece of flak came in the nose, went straight up between us and out the top, and really didn't hurt a thing. But now here's what blew my mind about that particular mission. After the war, working for General Electric, one of my jobs was taking foreign scientists around our GE plants in this country and showing them things. Mm-hmm. And I took a German physicist around our plant in Illinois, and I was instructed to answer all his questions honestly, but volunteer nothing. Yeah. And we wound up talking about the war. And would you believe that that man, it turned out, was an anti-aircraft gunner at Munich shooting at us when we went over that day. Munich was his home. He says, my mother still remembers that mission. I've often wondered if his gun fired that shell.
Yeah. One of the big question marks of life.
Yeah. Well, after he went back to Germany, I got a lovely Christmas card from him, and we corresponded for a few years, but of course we've lost touch now. Yeah.
That seems to be the way. You have short notice, didn't you, with your outfit? You know, conscript money with all the crews and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We tried to keep in touch, but as you say, 50, 60 years, when you knock them off like that,
we all go our ways.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, when you got home, what kind of reception did you get?
Well,
were you the hero, a welcome home, or just glad to be there and people glad to see you?
I'd say just glad to be there. There was no such things as parades and that sort of thing. We had the GI Bill, and I started college about a week after I was discharged.
Good. No 5220?
No. No, there wasn't. I didn't draw any unemployment comp. I was discharged November 24th, I believe it was, and I started college about December 5th. Wow. At Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And I wanted to be an engineer. And so I took pre-engineering at SIU. Now today you could get a degree there. In those days you had to go to a university. Like I applied to University of Illinois, Washington U, and Purdue, and got into Washington U, and got my degree from there in 1949.
No, you what, double E, M-E?
IE.
I-E.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted technical education, but not too technical.
Now, I don't know if you cut the short, but when you get home, did you join anything like, say, the Legion, VFW, DAV, or anything like that?
No, I didn't. I really don't know why, except that I've never been that much of a joiner. I never joined a veterans organization, and I really don't know why. I probably missed a lot, but I didn't at any rate.
Yeah, okay.
So I did get a kick out of being in the reserve. I like maintaining touch with the Air Force that way.
Now, do you still have any kind of crew reunions or anything like that on a regular basis, or every once in a while?
Our 456th Bomb Group has a crew reunion every year, and I have never gone to one. And the reason is I get the newsletters, and I read these newsletters, and I recognize the names of the airplane, but not the people.
Oh.
And my pilot did go to one, and he said, frankly, it was a big disappointment, because he said he didn't find the people all that friendly, actually.
Oh,
I don't know.
That's strange.
It is. It is. You would think people with common interests like that would be friendlier, but anyway, based on his input and my own inclinations, also these reunions are very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But I've never gone to one. So, as I say, I touch base with my pilot once a year. He's the only one that I do. Our tail gunner was from over here in Thompsonville, Connecticut.
Oh.
And I tried to look him up, but I don't know what happened, but his kids made it kind of obvious that my inquiries weren't welcome.
Oh.
And I take it he came up with some kind of mental problems after the war.
Yeah. It
I don't know.
To a lot of guys.
Yep.
Oh, that's good.
As a matter of fact, it was kind of funny. This Lieutenant Taylor, who became our first pilot after the war, he bought a war surplus AT-6. He was a mechanic for Continental Airlines in Memphis, Tennessee. He crashed that AT-6 and killed himself and his father.
Oh.
And he had the ball turret gunner then married Lieutenant Taylor's wife.
Oh.
So
It's a small world.
small world is
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Changing gears a little bit, when we were talking before, I noticed that your jacket has shrunk.
My jacket has shrunk considerably.
Could you explain some of your fruit salad and what it means so people can see it and get a good feel for it?
This, of course, is the ruptured duct,
Oh, yeah.
which every serviceman knows indicated he had been discharged. This is the Presidential Unit Citation. Our group, the 456th, won one citation for bombing Wiener Neustadt, Austria, when all other groups turned back. Ours persisted on
Right straight through.
and bombed an aircraft factory there. The other one was in, we got an Oakley cluster to it for bombing at Budapest, Austria. I don't know the details of that one. I was not involved, but I still wear the ribbon.
Sure.
This, of course, is the European Theater medal. This is the Air Medal with oak leaf cluster. We got that pretty much automatically.
What, after 15 missions?
No,
or 20?
well, after five, and then you'd get an oak leaf cluster
yeah.
every 10. So if you flew 35 missions, you would have wound up with 3 clusters and the medal. And of course, the other one, as every serviceman knows, is the Good Conduct Medal, which you got for just not fouling up.
Not getting caught.
Not getting caught. And of course, my gunner's wings.
Now, what kind of, the 15th then also was the 8th was over there. Now, you were in the southern end.
We were in Italy. The
Okay.
8th was in England.
Yeah.
And my group, the 456, was formed up to go to England. But then when Mussolini surrendered Italy, there were German airfields near Foggia, Italy, in what they call the Plains of Foggia. And Hap Arnold and President Roosevelt decided to put an Air Force there. They ultimately wound up with, I'm not sure how many, but something like 10,000 airplanes.
Wow.
There was 21 groups. And
All in that one area?
yeah, all in that one area around the Plains of Foggia. It's kind of interesting. I brought with me, and I hardly recommend it, a book by Stephen Ambrose, The Wild Blue. It's actually presidential candidate McGovern's autobiography.
Good.
McGovern was on our base and a pilot, although I didn't know him at the time. He flew his full 35 missions, and as I read that book, I was on 8 of them with him.
Wow.
And I got a kick out of that, of course. But
does he ever correspond with some of the guys, or is that just wild dreaming?
I have no idea at all about that. I didn't know. Lieutenant McGovern at the time, before he became senator and presidential candidate, of course, he was in the 455th, 741st Squadron. I was in the 456th, and we were on the same air base. We shared the same runway. But we very seldom went outside our squadron area. We lived and breathed within that squadron area. Our tents were in an olive grove, and like I say, we shared one runway, and we lived and breathed as a crew of 9 people, and we hardly ever did anything except with each other.
Yeah.
Well, I really didn't get to know that many people in the 456 because we were, I guess parochial's a word or whatever.
Just homebodies, that's all.
Yeah.
Now, how's the best way to ask it? Now, with all that, and you look back on it, how has it affected your life? Say after you got home and started in business again?
It affected me tremendously, not so much psychologically or anything like that, but by being a veteran, I was eligible, like yourself, for the GI Bill.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to go to Washington University, which was a very expensive school. I wouldn't have even got near Washington U without the GI Bill. I'd been lucky to go to Southern Illinois. And so it allowed me to go to an expensive university, and our grandkids today would laugh, but expensive in those days was $500 a year.
Yeah, yeah.
$250 a semester tuition. And Washington U was a good school, and I felt that it was an opportunity I would never have had otherwise.
Amen. Amen. Yeah.
So I was very grateful for that.
I think that's the life raft, if you will, of every one of us that came back. You could go to school. You don't have no idea where you would be today hadn't been for that, but your life has definitely
I most
been
likely would have been a farmer in Southern Illinois.
Okay, and I've probably been buying the wheat from you because I farm out in Iowa, slopping hogs.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
now, we've got some good stuff here in addition to what you've got there. Could you take a few minutes and show us some of the things that I know the people would like to see?
well,
If you will.
this is the group picture.
Oh, okay, I'll try to hold
Taken
it
in
up here.
January of 1945, posed in front of the airplane Jacob's Ladder. I have no idea where it got that name, but it had a ladder going up into the sky, and we flew Jacob's Ladder home. The last time I saw it was 1945 as they towed it away to the junkyard.
Oh, we're down at
Savannah,
Tucson?
Georgia.
Savannah, okay.
Well, probably wound up in Tucson.
Now this, if you will, this little kid here, that's you.
That's me right there.
Uh-huh.
Now, when I was in basic training, I was 18 years old.
Oh,
and
this is a goodie.
yeah, I
we
got
go.
this formal picture for my mother, and I had given it to her. And of course, she has passed away now, and I got the picture back.
Yeah.
Coming home, another picture of me.
Good-looking dude, though, huh?
Well, I'll get off of this in a minute. But this is Borinquin Field on the way home, 19 years old.
Oh.
And I had that other photo. What did I do with it? I had that other photo that we showed people.
Oh, yeah.
When we
your
went down. I thought that one was interesting.
This is interesting. Here, I'll hold it up, but you tell us what this is.
Well, this was an identification, I'll hold the original here by it, that we carried with us on missions. And it says, I'm an American airman. Please take me to your commanding officer and notify nearest American or British military mission in Belgrade, Bucharest, Poltava, or other nearby place. Also, please arrange for transportation. And then I got, show this to the Russians. I'm an American. Show this to the Poles, the Czechs, the Yugoslavs, and the Hungarians.
So you were covered, if you will.
So we were covered wherever we were apt to go down. I thought that was interesting too.
Fortunately, you didn't have to use it, I guess.
Fortunately, we didn't have to use it. I kept a record, which You can just hold it
Oh,
up.
yeah.
A calendar of our bomb group and the missions that we flew. I won't go into them anymore, and we already have.
All
But
right.
this was my record of the war as it affected
kind of
me.
a daily diary.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were commanded by a colonel named Thomas W. Steed, so we were known as Steed's Flying Colts. And we had a Red Cross girl who I have been in touch with since I moved to Massachusetts. She lives down here in Terringham.
Oh.
And she was the one that gave us the coffee and the donuts after each mission.
Uh-huh. That must have been great.
But, and then some of these other pictures, we always got a big kick out of nose art. I'm sure that that's too small to show, but the heavenly body,
Oh, I can describe it.
yeah,
Wow.
or forever amber.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
And then we had,
The petty girls, aren't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
then we
Remember
had planes that had cartoons on them, so to speak. This was the Phony Express, not the Pony Express, the Phony Express.
Pony Express, huh?
I don't know where they came
Now
up
that
with
was,
these names.
in effect, that was where you positioned.
Right above you where you report.
Oh, okay.
Right there,
Yeah.
by your forefinger.
So you were the first guy to see what was going on.
I was the first guy to see what was going on. We would fly a 7-airplane formation, and our lead plane would carry a bombardier with a Norden bomb sight, and the other 6 of us would toggle off of him. So my job was to keep my eye on the belly of that lead plane, and I had an extension cord in my right hand with a toggle switch. And the minute I saw the first bomb come out, I go,
Hit it.
chunk, and salvo our load.
Okay.
And there's one other mission I do want to mention just very briefly, because this only happened once in the whole war. At Tarvisio in northern Italy, we scored the only perfect bombing of the war. We put up 28 airplanes, 7 per squadron. Every airplane dropped every bomb within 1,000 feet of the target.
Good.
That was the only time that ever happened. And at home, I have a picture of General Hap Arnold, who was the head of the Air Force at the time, a 5-star general, signing the bomb strike photos.
Oh.
Like I say, that's the only time that ever happened in World War II, a perfect
Okay.
bombing.
We've read after through your Information Act and that kind of stuff that at times it was impossible to see, but still you had to get rid of your load and just drop them wherever and just hope something got hit. But
Well,
that's rough.
we did do that a time or two.
Well, we're coming back sometimes now. I said, do you ever have anything hung up in the bomb bay?
Funny you'd ask that one. 'Cause, yeah, we did
not
once.
too funny. I know that one.
The bomb bay doors on a B-24 slid up like a garage door. They didn't open out, they rolled up.
Yeah.
And we had a 250-pound bomb, didn't drop straight down and out as it was supposed to. And it got hung up between the door and the frame of the plane.
Ooh.
And our engineer had to step out into the bomb bay and take one of his feet and kick it out. And fortunately, of course, he disarmed it first before he did. But yeah, we did. That's the only time we ever had one hang, but it did happen.
No, other than I think that was your third trip. Would you ever have the position where you had to come in low, that something just wasn't working, the hydraulics were short, and you couldn't get the wheels down, or the Hollywood kind of landings, not putting it down?
No, the wildest landing that I ever was involved in was we had one of the main landing gear tires shot out at the target, but didn't know it.
Oh.
You can't tell a flat tire when
When they're all round. No.
when you're in the air.
Yeah.
And we landed with the right tire flat. The plane veered to the right, and Lieutenant Taylor had presence of mind enough to give that right throttle, full throttle,
Twist it around.
to try to pull it left. And he managed to not keep it on the runway, but slow it down to maybe 60 miles an hour, I don't know. We ran off the runway at about that speed, and there was a ditch beside the runway. And the right landing gear, when it hit that ditch, the plane just pivoted around about 3 times in a circle and dropped down. The wing hit the ground, ruined an engine, of course, and shook us all up. It didn't hurt anybody.
Good.
Yeah, no.
The other thing about being hurt, is it safe to ask you, every time you guys ever get airsick?
Oh, yeah.
Particularly at altitude with a mask on?
No, not at altitude with a mask on. I personally got air sick many times in training missions. And this shows the fact that air sickness is psychological. I never got sick on a combat mission.
Beautiful.
Nope. What we did have to watch with oxygen was it was as cold as 60 below zero.
And the lines freeze.
Your line would freeze, and your oxygen mask was rubber, and your breath would condense in there and freeze, and you had a flutter valve. And you had to watch that flutter valve, and as long as you were getting oxygen, this thing would be going flutter, flutter, flutter. But if it stopped fluttering, you had to jerk off the mask, hit it against the palm of your hand like this, and crack the ice, and then throw it out, and then put it back on again.
Wow.
And take a dose of 100% oxygen. The cold hit us two ways in the case like that of oxygen, and also we wore electric suits. And twice I had my electric suit short out. Once the electric suit was almost like a toaster. It had wiggle wires like an electric blanket in it. And I had about 2 or 3 of those wires burned into the cheek of my rear where the thing shorted out. Needless to say, you unplug the pants real quick in a case like that. And I had a glove short out once and burned the back of my hand. And there again, you jerk the cord on that glove. And needless to say, that hand gets pretty cold at 60 below zero.
Same kind of a thought getting back to when you were in whichever the way the Air Force was decided, was it because of your size or desire that you became a gunner?
Well, I got kicked out of aviation cadets because they decided they had too many. I wanted to get a promotion, and the only way to do it was to volunteer for something, so I volunteered for gunnery school. Now, why did I become a nose gunner? I don't know, the luck of the draw. They farmed us up into crews over here at Westover. I didn't ask to be a nose gunner. As small as I was at that time, I could have been a ball turret gunner.
Yeah, but that's even worse, is what, the belly ball?
Well, it can be frightening. I have flown in a ball turret a few times, and it's quite a thrill being down there. The ball turret gunner gets out of his turret as you approach the target in those days. And our ball turret gunner, as was the case with most crews, his job was to disperse what we call chaff. Chaff was shredded aluminum that you threw out to confuse the enemy radar. And as the enemy would shoot at you, and the closer it came, the faster the ball turret gunner would throw the chaff, till it looked like it was snowing chaff. But
now, a lot of people, mechanically, if you will, those ships, planes, were never pressurized, were they?
No.
So that you didn't have to worry about someone putting a hole through it and everything gets sucked out. You were just you and the hot suit, and that was it.
Us, the hot suit, and the oxygen mask. And if you had to move around within the plane, you had a portable bottle. You unplugged yourself from the ship's oxygen system, and you had, about a 2-quart bottle.
That'll get you where you had to go.
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe 15 minutes, something like that. I don't know.
Were any of the guys in your crew wounded and shot up, hit, if you will, in air that you had to bring back in some manner?
No. We had one Purple Heart issued in our crew, and this is a little hypocritical, if you will. A navigator that was flying with us, he wasn't part of our regular crew, stuck his finger in a heater fan, and he got the Purple Heart.
Oh, yeah, drew blood in combat.
He drew blood in combat, and the reason he stuck his finger in a heater fan was after we took off, we all smoked a cigarette. And he dropped his lighter, and it went down behind some instruments there in the nose, and he was reaching around trying to find his lighter, and he stuck his finger in the fan. And he got the Purple Heart.
Oh, yeah.
And this is one of the very few times that I ever told an officer off. But I ran into him the night the war ended in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, the night the war ended in the Pacific. And here was this lieutenant wearing his Purple Heart. And I said, "You hypocritical SOB, you got nerve enough to wear that medal?" And he did.
Sure. And he probably milked the 316 too for schooling.
Yep, he did.
Yeah, golly. Well,
no, and like I say, our pilot was shot down on his first mission, but he was not hurt in any way.
Good.
He just had to bail out.
Good. Oh, it sounded like you had some fun.
We had a lot of fun. We flew home by way of the South Atlantic route.
Well, the Azores back?
Well, no, that's the central, the Azores. The South Atlantic, you go to Dakar in Africa, and then over to Brazil.
Okay.
And we hedge hopped, if you will, across the Sahara Desert, and that was fun. We saw 2 or 3 camel caravans down below, some oasis, but we flew from Oran to Dakar at an altitude of about 500 feet across the Sahara Desert.
Blowing up the dust?
Probably, but didn't bother us any, of course.
Did you have any, I will say, good times while you were stationed over there? Went on leave, liberty, whatever you call it?
Oh, yes.
Anything special that you're really proud of?
After about halfway through your tour of duty, you got to go to rest camp. And my crew elected to go to the Isle of Capri. So we spent a week on Capri, and that was wonderful. We stayed in hotels that only multimillionaires stayed in before the war.
Yeah.
And Capri was a beautiful place, and that was probably the highlight of having fun. We had our choice. We could have gone to Rome, or we could go to Capri, and we went to Capri. And the war ended the afternoon we were in Naples Bay alongside an American cruiser, and there were a bunch of sailors hanging over the side of this American ship, painting and chipping paint. And they went beep, 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 and they announced on the PA system of this ship that the war had ended in Europe. Well, all the paint brushes, chisels, and so forth over the shoulder into Naples Bay.
Yep.
And up they went up the side, came back about 10 minutes later and went on leave.
Great.
And what a wild time they
Now,
had.
have you ever had the idea or the thought, or in fact, go back to some of those places, just to, if you will, kind of look it over in a different outlook on it?
Very definitely. I've had that thought. I have never done it and probably never will now because my wife has physical problems. I really can't travel very good. But yes, I did want to go back to Italy and look around. Just never did. Too late now.
Yeah. It's never too late, but you knock on wood a little bit. Now, you've got kids and grandkids. Have they ever bugged you and say, "Hey, Grandpa, what did you do in the war?"
Not too much.
Did they seem interested, or is it just something they've heard of in the past?
I would say it's something they've heard of. They humor me and they listen if I want to tell a story, and as you can tell, I like to tell stories. But really, I don't think they're all that interested. My grandson seems to be more interested than my own kids for some reason.
Because why I ask, I'm not tooting my horn, but I'm lucky. I got a real good job down there at the Rockwell Museum. And one of the things I like to talk about is an exhibit they have of the 4 freedoms. And you'd be surprised how many people come in there and they listen. And my wife gets a kick out of this, but say, what do you know about that? You're too young. My first question is, how the hell do you look young or old? If you were there, you lived it. But the questions that they ask, they're starting to come back. If you will, like that Tom Brokaw show, the great gang, whatever they call those guys. This, I think, is a resurgence in what really happened. We've read time and time again, as you probably over there in Europe, about a lot of the people kind of poo-poo the Holocaust. They think it never happened. Somebody's wild imagination. There's a void there that's got to be filled. And I think this kind of a program, guys like yourself and me and all the others, if they want to, can help put the story in its proper perspective. No flag waving, but this is a hunk of history. You can't change it.
Right.
The only thing, and this is one of the reasons I think why we've gotten into it, statistically, and it's scary. From all the information I've been able to gather, at one time there were about 16 or 17 million guys and gals in the service in World War II. There have been more since. Of that, they say that right now, they're dying at the rate of maybe 12 to 1,500 a day.
Right.
So you and me, we're an endangered species. And that's why we're trying to get this thing before you read in the paper. He was, or she was. That means they're no longer here. And that piece of the puzzle will never be told, good, bad, or otherwise. And that's what we're trying to do, and we thank you for that kind of stuff. It's people just sharing what they did.
Yep.
And you've done a dang good job, if I may say so.
Well, thank you.
And we're proud of you.
I've enjoyed it.
Good.
It's a privilege.
The man says, press the flesh, Vern.
Yeah, it's a privilege to have been here.
You've got a good, strong hand. We thank you.
You bet.
Now, For those of you who are watching, if you'd like to come and share your stories with us, we're here. We invite you, we ask you, we plead for you. Because as we've just said, you are part of history, and your little piece will add to the whole thing. At the end, we'll give you a little identifier so that you can, if you'd like to, contact us here at the studio or the station. Let us know what you'd like to say and do, and we will be most happy to share it with you and then see the rest of the world. Your host, Bob Stevens, saying thank you very much for listening, and we hope that it's been worth your time. Vaya con Dios.